Stephen's back with us for Business News Now on the programme. Stephen, trade tensions back on the agenda once again, aren't they? US and China, they're moving even closer now. We've been talking about this for weeks, but closer now to a trade war.
Certainly, and the steps just seem to be getting bigger and bigger. This time it's the United States that's preparing to impose tariffs on another $200 billion worth of Chinese imports. That's a move that sent the markets into a tailspin, reigniting those fears of a trade war between the world's two largest economies. Now, this comes after both China and the United States imposed tariffs of $50 billion of each other's goods last Friday. Both Beijing and Washington say they're ready to go further with even more tariffs. Nicholas Rushworth has the latest.
We're going to cut down the deficits one way or the other. We have a deficit with China of at least $500 billion.
Donald Trump is on the attack in an escalating trade war between the world's two largest economies, the US and China, with the US president asking his administration to identify a new list of $200 billion worth of Chinese goods that he can penalize with 10% tariffs, and won't stop there. He said that further action must be taken to encourage China to change its unfair practices, open its market to United States goods, and accept a more balanced trade relationship with the United States. Beijing hit right back, with China's Commerce Ministry describing the threat as blackmail and saying that if the United States acts irrationally and issues a list, China will have no choice but to take comprehensive measures of a corresponding number and quality and take strong, powerful countermeasures. The trade dispute began back in January with US tariffs on solar panels and washing machines. Then in March came tariffs on steel and aluminium, a move targeting other countries as well. China riposted in April. Then last Friday, the 15th of June, the US imposed 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese imports. Beijing equaled that in a tit-for-tat response. Now Trump is threatening more. As this trade war ramps up, analysts fear it could destabilize the global economy. While there have been bilateral trade talks, Trump's latest statement heightens trade tensions, making the path to a negotiated deal more problematic.
But of course, trade tensions have really been the biggest story of the year for the markets. They're not too impressed by this latest development. Shares tumbling in Asia. On Wall Street as well, we saw yesterday, but the Asian markets, and particularly in China, seeing hammering, in fact, towards the end of trading. Shanghai Composite down over 3%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down by 3% as well, and falls too in Tokyo and in Seoul. Now, it's worth pointing out the Chinese markets were closed yesterday, so they're really catching up on the news that has happened in the past few days. Here in Europe, a flush of red across the open today as well. We're seeing all the major European markets opening down. Mining companies among the big fallers as well. Of course, they do a lot of business with China. Steel makers also being hit. Car makers also being hit. So lots of companies with exposure to China worried about what's going to happen next there. That's the picture on the open in Europe. Well, like one company that's having a particularly bad day on the markets is the Chinese telecoms firm ZTE. Its shares down over 25% in Hong Kong after the US Senate voted to block a deal which would have allowed them to resume trading with the United States. Earlier this month, the Trump administration had agreed for ZTE to pay a $1.4 billion fine to lift a ban on its buying US components. But senators inserted this clause into a defense bill to reject that deal. A better day, though, for the Japanese flea market app Macari. Its shares jumping by up to 76% on its first day of trading in Tokyo. The company raising more than €1 billion through its initial public offering. Macari has 10 million customers in Japan. It's expecting its sales to jump by over 60% this year. Now, next, Apple has been ordered to pay 9 million Australian dollars, or around 5.7 million euros, for misleading customers with faulty iPhones. The country's Competition and Consumer Commission had been investigating a complaint by users whose devices were disabled after downloading an update of iOS. Apple had refused to fix devices that had been repaired by a third party, the Commission successfully arguing that that was a breach of Australian law. And staying with Apple, the US Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case on whether its App Store constitutes unfair competition. The lawsuit is being taken by a group of iPhone owners who claim that Apple's monopoly on apps for its operating system lead to inflated prices. They argue that consumers should be able to buy iPhone apps from other sources as well. The Supreme Court will now get to decide whether or not the case goes to trial. Well, finally from me, how much would you pay to get a first look at a new part of Disneyland? The company's offering die-hard fans a chance for a 6-hour preview of the Pixar Pier at its California Adventure Park, the day before the attraction opens to the public. It includes the Incredicoaster, based on characters from The Incredibles. The price, though, a cool $299. It won't even be the complete attraction. Some rides, including one themed around Inside Out, aren't expected to open until next year. So you want to be a real die-hard fan, I think, to pay that price for it.
Only 6 hours? You'd only get 2 rides in, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
it's 3 hours to queue for each thing in the first place, I think. Anyway.